My name is Savannah Brooke Weston. I'm 26 years old, and 3 days before my wedding, I found out that my own parents had made a joint decision, together, calmly over dinner, that they would not be attending my ceremony. Not because they were sick, not because of an emergency, but because the man I was marrying wore a uniform to work, because he clocked in at a security booth instead of a corner office, because when my father asked him what he drove, and Daniel said a 2017 Civic, my father actually laughed out loud at the dinner table in front of me. What my parents didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my coworker and closest friend, a woman named Renata Osai, had been quietly watching this whole situation unfold for 6 months. She hadn't said a word about what she was doing. She just watched, documented, and waited. And what she had been building was something my parents never saw coming. But before I take you there, let me take you back to the night Daniel Reyes asked me to marry him, and the phone call from my mother that came before I even finished crying happy tears. Daniel is not a man who tries to impress people. He's 29, from Modesto, California, the son of a retired postal worker and a woman who spent 22 years cleaning hotel rooms so her kids could go to college. He has broad shoulders, a quiet voice, and the kind of steady patience that only comes from a man who has never had the luxury of falling apart. He works security at the Harlow Tower in downtown Sacramento, has for 4 years, night shifts mostly. He reads books during the slow hours, history books mostly, thick ones with dog-eared pages and penciled notes in the margins. That is how I met him. I work as a content manager for a regional marketing firm on the 11th floor of that same building. One night, I stayed late finishing a campaign rollout and missed the last elevator. I was standing in the lobby at 11:40 p.m. looking defeated, and Daniel walked over from his booth with a granola bar and a completely serious expression and said, "You look like someone who forgot to eat today." He wasn't wrong. We talked for 40 minutes in that lobby about books, about his mother, about the fact that I had grown up in Fresno and hated the heat but moved somewhere hotter anyway. He walked me to my car at midnight and didn't ask for my number. He just said, "Same time tomorrow?" I laughed the whole drive home. That was 2 years before the night he drove me to the Sacramento River waterfront on a Tuesday in November and spread a blanket on the grass near the old Tower Bridge and opened a thermos of hot chocolate he had made himself and said with zero ceremony and complete certainty, "I want to spend everything I have left with you. All of it. Every ordinary Tuesday." He pulled out a ring, small, silver, with a pale blue stone, his grandmother's. She had given it to him specifically, he told me, because she said she could tell from a photo he showed her that I had kind eyes. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I was still crying when my phone buzzed. "Mom, Savannah, your Aunt Gloria just posted something. Is it true? Did he propose?" I wiped my face. "Yes, Mom, just now. What's his plan? What are you two doing for housing? You're not moving into that apartment of his, I hope. Your father wants to know what his 5-year—" "Mom, we literally just got engaged, like 5 minutes ago." A pause. Then her voice shifted into something softer, but not warmer. "I just want to make sure you've thought this through, honey. You know how you get swept up." I looked at Daniel. He was watching the bridge lights on the water, giving me privacy, pretending not to hear. I told my mother I'd call her tomorrow. She exhaled like I had said something irresponsible. That was the first crack in something I didn't yet know was already breaking. My parents, Clifton and Margaret Weston, are, by every visible measurement, successful people. My father is 58, a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distributor. He drives a company Audi, belongs to a golf club he visits twice a month, and has strong opinions about everything that can be assigned a dollar value. My mother is 55, runs a small interior design consultancy out of their home in Granite Bay, has a waiting list of clients, and can walk into a room and within 30 seconds tell you what it's worth and what it's missing. They have been married for 31 years. They love me, I believe that, but their version of love comes with a very specific floor plan, a blueprint, loading-bearing walls that cannot be moved. And for most of my life, I just lived inside their blueprint. I studied business because my father suggested it. I took the marketing job because it was in a building my mother called legitimate. I dated a financial analyst named Brooks for 14 months because my parents called him a good fit. and I didn't yet understand that good fit and good person are not the same thing. Brooks was handsome and ambitious and told me very gently, very consistently, that I was too emotional, too easily distracted, too much. By the time I left him, I'd stopped trusting my own instincts entirely. Then I met Daniel, and something in me remembered itself. When I told my parents about Daniel, really told them, not just mentioned him, I watched my father's face move through several emotions in about 4 seconds and land on a carefully controlled version of concern. Security guard, he said, like he was reading a medical diagnosis. He's a senior security officer, I said. He manages the overnight team for the whole building. Savannah, that was my mother. She said my name the way you say careful to someone standing too close to the edge of something. Dinner that night was polite and surgical. My father asked Daniel about his degree. Daniel said he had completed 2 years of community college, and then his mother got sick and he went home. My father nodded slowly in a way that meant he had already filed his verdict. My mother asked about his family. Daniel talked about his mom, Rosa, with so much warmth and specificity. Her garden, the tamales she made every Christmas, the way she always answered the phone by saying, "Mi amor," that I felt something shift in the room. But my parents were not people who were moved by warmth. They were moved by categories, and Daniel did not fit their categories. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet. At a red light, he said, "They're not gonna come around easy." "They will," I said. He looked at me, not unkindly. "I don't need them to, Savannah. I just need you to be honest with yourself about who they are." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to be that honest yet. My friend Renata Osai works in the graphic design department on my floor. She's 31, originally from Accra, Ghana, raised in Atlanta. With close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wears pushed up on her forehead like a headband, even when she doesn't need them. She is the sharpest person I have ever met, not in a loud way, in the way of someone who sees 10 moves ahead and says nothing until the moment is exactly right. She had watched my parents at the one dinner she attended with us. She watched my father ask Daniel where he parked and then comment on the neighborhood. She watched my mother turn every conversation back to resale value and zip codes. Afterward, in the parking lot, Renata put on her coat and said to me, very quietly, "Those are not people who are going to help you." "They're my parents," I said. "I know. That's why I said what I said." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But she had already started doing something about it. The engagement was in November. By January, my parents had graduated from subtle disapproval to active campaign. My mother began calling my older sister, Diane. Diane lives in Portland, doesn't come home often, and has always been the family diplomat. She texted me one Sunday, "Mom keeps calling me. She says she's worried about you." She used the word impulsive 4 times. My father had lunch with my Uncle Raymond, my mother's brother who I have always been close to, and apparently spent 45 minutes explaining why Daniel was not billed for the long term. My Uncle Raymond called me that same evening. "Your father came to see me today," he said, his voice careful. "I know," I said. "What did he say?" "He said Daniel doesn't have ambition." Raymond paused. I told him that a man who works nights so his mother doesn't lose her house sounds like the definition of ambition to me. Your father didn't love that answer. I laughed, but it caught in my throat. The next week, my mother called Daniel directly. Daniel told me that evening. He set his phone on the kitchen counter the way someone sets down something fragile. "Your mother called me this afternoon." I went still. "She said she wanted to be honest with me because she felt I deserved honesty. She said you have a history of romanticizing situations and losing interest once the reality sets in." She used the phrase pattern of idealization. I sat down. "She said your last relationship ended because you got bored. She said the life I could give you would eventually feel like a cage." The room was completely quiet. "What did you say?" I asked. I said that Savannah left a man who made her feel small. I said that doesn't sound like boredom. It sounds like self-respect. He looked at me steadily. Then he thanked her for calling and hung up. I called my mother immediately. I was trying to protect him. He deserves to know what he's walking into. What he's walking into? Mom, I am not a disaster scenario. I am your daughter. You've always been sensitive, Savannah. You take things too personally. I called your fiancé and I told him the truth. I heard something in her voice that stopped me cold. Not cruelty, certainty. She genuinely believed what she was saying. She had built a story about me, fragile, impulsive, romantic to a fault, and she had been living inside that story for so long, she forgot she wrote it. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I lay on my side of the bed staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept, and I thought about the version of myself my parents had authored, and I thought about how long I had been auditioning for their approval instead of living my own life. Something cold and clear moved through me. I was done auditioning. The wedding was set for April. We had saved carefully, Daniel and I both, $11,000 over 18 months. He picked up extra shifts. I took on 2 freelance clients on weekends. Every dollar tracked in a shared spreadsheet. Every deposit paid on time. The venue, the Elmwood Garden, an outdoor event space east of Sacramento, with oak trees and a pergola covered in climbing roses. We had put down $2,200. The caterer, a woman named Claudia who ran a family Mexican restaurant nearby. Full spread, carne asada, rice, beans, tres leches cake, agua fresca in big glass dispensers. The photographer, a friend of Daniel's named Terrence, who shot weddings on weekends and whose work made people cry. The flowers, simple. White ranunculus, eucalyptus, garden roses. Nothing formal, just real. And then February came, and my parents made their move. It started with my father calling our venue. I found out by accident. I called the Elmwood Garden to ask about their rehearsal schedule, and the coordinator, a kind woman named Patricia, said, "We did receive a call from a Mr. Weston last week. He asked some questions about our cancellation policy." I kept my voice even. "What kind of questions?" She asked what the process was if the deposit holder needed to cancel for medical or family emergency reasons. I thanked her and hung up. I called Renata. "Don't do anything yet," she said immediately. "Renata, my father called our venue and asked about cancellation." "I know. Don't do anything yet. Give me until Friday." "What are you doing?" A pause. Then, "I've been doing it for 6 months, Savannah. Trust me." I don't know why I trusted her. I just did. The Friday before Valentine's Day, my parents came to dinner at our apartment. Daniel made his mother's red rice and chicken. My father sat at our small kitchen table and looked at the ceiling like he was calculating the square footage. Halfway through dinner, my father set down his fork. "We need to be honest with you both." Daniel looked at him. I looked at the table. "Your mother and I have talked at length about this. We've prayed about it, and we cannot in good conscience support this marriage. We will not be attending the wedding." The room went absolutely silent. "Dad, this isn't about Daniel personally." My father's voice was measured. "It's about what we know about you, Savannah, about what you need, and what this life will become in 5 years, when the romance wears off and there are real decisions to be made." My mother reached across and touched my hand. Her touch was gentle, and her eyes were soft, and the combination made me feel sick, because I knew it was theater. "We love you," she said. "That's exactly why we can't watch you do this." Daniel had not moved. He was looking at my father with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, something quieter and more devastating than anger. "Mr. Weston, I want to ask you something directly." My father nodded, gracious in the way of a man who assumes he will not be challenged. "In 4 years, have you ever asked me a single question about who I am? Not what I do, who I am." My father blinked. "Because I can tell you about my mother's medical bills and what I did so she could keep her house. I can tell you about the night class I've been taking for 18 months toward a facilities management certification. I can tell you what Savannah looked like the night I met her, and exactly what she said and why it mattered. I can tell you anything you want to know about who I am." He paused. "But you've never asked." My father's jaw tightened. "We're not questioning your character, Daniel," my mother said. "With respect, ma'am, you are." He folded his napkin carefully. "And that's okay, but I think you should know you're doing it." They left 20 minutes later. At the door, my mother hugged me. "The offer stands," she said quietly. "We'll help you if things change." I closed the door. I did not cry. I sat on the couch for a long time. Then I called Renata. She picked up on the first ring. "They said they're not coming." A beat of silence. Then, "I know. Are you okay?" "No. Tell me what you've been doing for 6 months." Another pause. Then, "Come over tomorrow morning. Bring coffee. I'll show you everything." Renata's apartment is small and precisely organized. The kind of organized that means she has thought carefully about how she wants to live. She sat me on her couch the next morning and opened her laptop and a spiral notebook and a folder with tabbed sections, and she said, "Let me start at the beginning. Don't interrupt until I'm done." I nodded. "The week after you told me about the dinner where your father laughed at Daniel's car, I started documenting." She turned the laptop toward me, a running log. Dates, incidents, direct quotes I had told her, a timeline. I reached out to the Elmwood Gardens 6 months ago and spoke with Patricia personally. I explained the situation without naming anyone specifically and asked if they would notify me directly if anyone called attempting to alter or cancel the reservation. She tapped the notebook. "Patricia called me 11 days ago. Your father called them on February 3rd. My breath caught. "I also contacted your caterer, Claudia. Same arrangement. Your florist. Your photographer, Terrence, already knows Daniel personally, so he came to me voluntarily 2 weeks ago when your mother emailed him asking what his cancellation fee was." I stared at her. "Your mother emailed my photographer?" "She did. He forwarded it to me immediately." Renata turned a page. "Now, here's what I've set up as contingency." She walked me through it like a project brief. Backup venue, the Sycamore Terrace, a private garden property owned by a couple named the Nguyen's, who were former clients of a nonprofit Renata had once volunteered with. Already reserved, deposit paid, Renata's own money 4 months ago. Backup caterer, Claudia herself, who had told Renata in November that if anything happened to the original booking, she would personally make sure the food happened anyway, no extra charge. "I like that girl," Claudia had apparently said, "and I like that man. The way he talks about his mother, you can trust a man who talks about his mother like that." Backup flowers, Renata's neighbor, a retired woman named Mrs. Park, who kept an enormous garden and had been told the story in its entirety and said with complete calm, "Tell me what she wants. I'll have it ready by 7 in the morning." Full guest contact list, Renata had built a parallel database, 94 guests, every phone number, every email, cross-referenced against my contacts over months of casual conversation where I hadn't even realized she was memorizing names. "If your parents or anyone else compromises the original vendors in the next 3 weeks," Renata said, "I send one mass text to all 94 guests with the new address. I tell them it's a last-minute location upgrade. Your parents get the original address, only the original address." I sat there holding my coffee cup. "You did all this?" She looked at me steadily. "You're my person, Savannah. What else would I do?" I had to look at the ceiling for a moment to hold myself together. "There's one more thing," she said. She turned to the laptop again. "A social media profile. A man named Garrett Cole, a local videographer and documentary storyteller with 55,000 followers across his platforms, Sacramento-based, known for emotional, human interest content. I reached out to him 3 weeks ago," she said. "I told him I had a story about a woman whose parents refused to attend her wedding because of what her fiancé does for work, and that I had reason to believe something was going to happen worth documenting." "Renata, he's not there to expose anyone. He's there to tell the truth. Your parents posted publicly. Your father put something on his LinkedIn last week implying you were making a financially irresponsible life decision. He made it public first." I pulled out my phone and searched my father's LinkedIn. There it was, a vague philosophical post about watching someone you love choose comfort over security and the painful reality of standing aside when guidance is refused. 43 likes, comments from his colleagues, and golf club connections. I put the phone down. I thought about the girl who had stayed with Brooks for 14 months because her parents approved. I thought about every time I had made myself smaller to fit the frame they built. I thought about Daniel at that dinner table, asking my father if he had ever once asked a real question. Okay, I said, let's do it. 11 days before the wedding, my father called the Elmwood Garden and attempted to cancel our reservation, claiming there had been a family medical situation and that the deposit holder, me, had authorized the cancellation. Patricia, per her arrangement with Renata, stalled him. We'll need written authorization from the account holder. Can you have her call us directly? He said he would arrange it. He never called back. But 3 days later, my mother called Claudia's restaurant and asked to speak with someone about an event modification. She gave my name. She had clearly done her research because she knew the reservation number. Claudia, who is a 61-year-old woman from Oaxaca who has raised 4 children and built a restaurant from zero and is not remotely intimidated by anyone, said, "Yes, I can help you with that. Can I get your name?" My mother gave her name. Claudia wrote it down. Then she called Renata. 6 days before the wedding, I was working from home when Renata showed up at my door unannounced with her laptop bag and a tray of coffees and said, "They made their move. It's time." She sat at my kitchen table and showed me the email chain. My mother had emailed Claudia, signed with my name, Savannah Weston, requesting a full cancellation and refund to the original card. She had forged my name in an email. My hands were shaking. How do we know it's her and not some mix-up? I asked, even though I already knew. Because the email was sent from an address that is 1 letter off from yours, and because the IP address metadata Claudia's son pulled shows it originated from a residential address in Granite Bay. Renata looked at me calmly. Your parents' address. I called Daniel. He drove home from his shift without stopping anywhere. He walked in, read everything Renata showed him, and stood in the kitchen very still for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to make a call." He took his phone to the bedroom. When he came out 20 minutes later, his expression was clear and quiet. I called my supervisor, Garrison, former Army, been in security for 22 years. He asked me a question I want to ask you. I looked at him. He said, "Does she want to survive this, or does she want the truth told?" I looked at Renata. I looked at Daniel. I looked at the email on the laptop screen where my own mother had signed my name to a lie. Both, I said. Daniel nodded. Then Garrison said he wants to help. I did not sleep well the nights before the wedding, but it was not the anxious, guilty insomnia of before. It was the insomnia of someone standing at the start of something real. I lay in the dark and thought about my parents, not with hatred, I want to be clear about that, with something more complicated. My father had worked hard. He had paid for my college, shown up at every graduation, taught me to drive in an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning when I was 15 and terrified. Those things were real. But I thought now about the architecture of our relationship, the way his approval had always been conditional on performance, the way my mother's softness was always deployed at moments of maximum leverage, the way they had decided, quietly and completely, that what I wanted for my life did not count as data. I thought about Brooks, the man they had approved, the man who had spent 14 months telling me I was too much. And I thought about Daniel, who in 4 years had never once asked me to be less. At 5 in the morning, I sent one text to Renata. "I'm ready." Her response came in under a minute. "Mrs. Park started the flowers at 4. Claudia's crew is setting up at 7. Garrett arrives at noon. You're going to be okay." Then I called my Uncle Raymond. He picked up immediately, as if he had been waiting. "Uncle Raymond," I said, "will you walk me down the aisle today?" His voice when he answered was rough and warm. "Savannah, I have been hoping you'd ask me that since November. Yes, absolutely yes. I'll be there at 1. The morning of the wedding, Renata was running on 3 hours of sleep and a level of organizational energy that I have never seen matched by any human being before or since. By 9 a.m., Garrett and his small crew were at the Sycamore Terrace, setting up, getting B-roll of Mrs. Park's flowers, white ranunculus, garden roses, sprigs of eucalyptus, exactly what I had chosen, being arranged along the wooden arch and the aisle chairs. By 10:30, Renata had confirmed 91 of 94 guests at the new address. My parents had been told, through a brief, neutral text from my sister Diane, who was the only family member who knew the full plan, that the wedding was still at the Elmwood Garden. Diane had agreed to this with quiet fury. She had not known everything until Renata briefed her the night before, and her reaction, apparently, had been a long silence followed by, "Tell me what you need me to do." At noon, I put on my dress. It was ivory, tea-length, simple, a vintage find from an estate sale in Midtown Sacramento that I had altered myself at the waist. My mother had called it sweet, but not wedding level. I called it perfect. Uncle Raymond arrived in a navy suit with a white pocket square and a gardenia pinned to his lapel that he said he had grown himself. He took one look at me in the hallway and pressed his lips together hard. "Your grandmother would have loved this. All of it, this whole day." Renata appeared in the doorway with her clipboard. "Ready?" I smoothed the front of my dress. "I have been ready for 2 years." The Sycamore Terrace sits at the end of a long private drive edged with old walnut trees. There is a white wooden gate, and beyond it, a wide green lawn with two enormous sycamore trees at the center, and Mrs. Park's flowers woven through every surface. The arch, the aisle markers, the tables, loose and real and alive, exactly as I had imagined. The late April light was the kind that makes everything look like it exists inside a photograph you already love. Guests arrived at 2 o'clock, and I watched from a side room as they came through the gate and stopped, the way people stop when something exceeds what they expected. Daniel's mother, Rosa, walked in slowly in a deep burgundy dress and stood still under the sycamore trees for a moment with her hand over her mouth. Daniel's coworker, Darrison, a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone who has made peace with everything, came through the gate and looked around and nodded once like the world had confirmed something. At 2:15, Renata came to find me. Her expression was quiet and certain. "Your parents are at the Elmwood Garden," she said. "Diane just texted me. They arrived together, dressed for the occasion. The coordinator told them the reservation was never canceled." I nodded. "They're calling you," Renata said. "I suggest you leave it." I looked at my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother, 1 from my father, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I turned my phone face down. Uncle Raymond appeared at the door. He offered his arm. "Slow and easy," he said. "Let them all see you." The ceremony was simple and completely ours. Daniel's friend Marcus, a pastor who had known Daniel for 15 years, officiated. He read one short passage about patience and choosing well, and then he stepped back and just let us talk. Daniel went first. His voice was steady, the way it always was, until he got to one particular moment, and then it wasn't. "I spent a long time being told by the world in various ways that I didn't have enough. Enough degree, enough title, enough zip code." He paused. "And I decided a long time ago that I would not measure my life by what other people thought I lacked. I would measure it by what I showed up for." He looked at me. "I am showing up for you. Every ordinary Tuesday, every hard night, every single day I have left. That is what I have. That is everything I have." I had not prepared to cry until that moment. My turn. I had written nothing down. I looked at him, and I just said what was true. I spent years believing that love was something you earned, that you had to be the right version of yourself to deserve it. I don't believe that anymore. You showed me I don't have to perform for you. I don't have to be smaller or simpler or less, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life reminding you that you are enough. More than enough. You have always been more than enough. Under the sycamore trees, in the April light, with 91 people on their feet, Marcus pronounced us married. The sound that rose from that lawn was the kind of sound you feel in your chest, rather than hear with your ears. I found out what happened at the Elmwood Garden later that evening, pieced together from Diane and from the footage Garrett captured. My parents had arrived at 2 o'clock in separate cars, my father in the Audi, my mother in her white Lexus, both dressed formally, my father in a dark suit, my mother in pale gray with heels. They had clearly reconsidered. Maybe guilt, maybe the public dimension of their absence, maybe something else. But they had come. The coordinator, Patricia, met them at the entrance and confirmed that yes, the Weston Reyes wedding was still scheduled, but she hadn't heard from the couple since the confirmation call 2 weeks prior. My parents waited. At 2:30, the parking lot was still empty. My father called me, voicemail. My mother called me, voicemail. They called Daniel, voicemail. They called Renata. Renata let it ring. My father, apparently, walked the perimeter of the venue twice. My mother sat in her car with the door open. At 3 o'clock, my father called his uncle Raymond. Raymond, bless him, answered on the third ring. He was standing at our reception table holding a glass of agua fresca when the call came in. Raymond, are you at the venue? Where is everyone? I'm at the venue, Clifton. It's beautiful. Savannah looks incredible. You're missing it. My father asked for the address. Raymond gave it to him. My parents arrived at the Sycamore Terrace at 3:22 p.m. The ceremony was over. We were in the middle of dinner. Claudia's food was on every table. The carne asada, the rice, the agua fresca in glass dispensers catching the light. And the string lights had just come on in the sycamore branches. And Daniel's 7-year-old niece, Camila, was running barefoot through the grass, shrieking every time a walnut fell. Garrett's camera caught them at the gate. A man at the entrance, Garrison, Daniel's supervisor, standing with his arms folded and a quiet authority that only comes from 22 years of experience, stepped forward. Evening, can I get your names? We are Savannah's parents, my father said. Garrison checked his phone. Not a tablet, a phone, with a list that Renata had sent him. He scrolled with complete calm, looked up. I don't see you on the guest list. I'm sorry. My mother's voice shifted. I am her mother. I gave birth to that girl. Yes, ma'am. Garrison's tone was not unkind. It was simply immovable. But I can't admit anyone who isn't on the list. Behind them, Garrett's camera was recording. The red light was small, and Garrett was at enough distance that my parents didn't notice it immediately. Guests near the gate had turned. Many of them had received Renata's venue change message, which had included one clear sentence. Due to an unauthorized attempt to cancel our wedding arrangements by a family member, we've relocated to the Sycamore Terrace. Everyone knew who the family member was. My father stood very still for a moment. He's a man accustomed to being the most important person in the room. He is not accustomed to being outside a gate. He looked past Garrison at the lights in the trees, at the tables full of people, at the arch still standing with Mrs. Park's white roses. He looked at his daughter, far across the lawn, laughing with her husband's family, completely unaware he was standing there. Then my mother saw the camera. Garrett had moved closer. Professional setup, steady shot. The red light was visible. My mother went very still. The soft, concerned expression she had worn to 100 conversations about my instability, the one she could summon like a tool, faltered. Because there is a difference between being seen in your private performance and being seen in your private performance while it is being documented. She touched my father's arm. They turned around, walked back to their cars, and drove away. Inside the garden, Daniel was spinning me slowly in the grass, while Rosa sang along quietly to the song playing from the speaker, and the lights in the sycamore trees swayed, and I had no idea my parents had come and gone. Renata watched their headlights disappear down the drive. She stood at the edge of the garden for a moment, and then she picked up her glass of agua fresca, walked back to the table, and sat down next to Mrs. Park, who was watching Camila chase a firefly. Everything okay? Mrs. Park asked. Yes, Renata said. Everything is exactly what it was supposed to be. The rest of the night was simple and whole, and ours. Rosa stood to speak during dinner. She had written notes on a folded piece of paper which she unfolded and then never looked at because she knew everything she wanted to say without reading it. I cleaned hotel rooms for 22 years, so my son could have a chance. And what I know is that a chance is only worth something if you use it to become somebody real. She looked at Daniel, then at me. He is real, and she is real, and together they are the truest thing I have ever seen up close. Garrison stood at the back and raised his glass without saying a word. Uncle Raymond spoke last. I've known this young woman since she was 4 years old, arguing with her father about which direction the sprinklers were pointing. A laugh went through the tables. She has always known what was right. She just spent a long time asking permission to believe it. He paused. She doesn't need permission anymore. He sat down. Camila promptly climbed into his lap. I learned about Garrison's role in full that night when Daniel told me the whole story. 4 years of working together. Garrison, who had watched Daniel work overtime to cover his mother's hospital bills without missing a shift. Garrison, who had watched the other security guys tease Daniel about dating the girl from the 11th floor, and Daniel smile calmly and say nothing because he didn't need to say anything. When Daniel called him the morning of the wedding, Garrison had listened to the entire situation and then said, "Son, I've been waiting for you to ask me to help. What do you need?" He drove to the Sycamore Terrace on his day off in his good clothes and stood at that gate for 3 hours because that is what Daniel needed. That is who this man was. That is who my parents decided wasn't enough. 2 days after the wedding, I wrote 2 letters, one to my mother, one to my father. Separate letters because they were separate people who had made a separate choice and needed to hear separate truths. My mother's letter said, "Mom, I know you believe you are protecting me. I know that belief is real for you, but you forged my name. You tried to cancel a life we built together, and you used my name to do it. That is not protection. That is control. I am not fragile. I never was. You built that story about me because it made you necessary. I understand why, but I am done being the story you need me to be. When you are ready to meet the person I actually am, not the version you wrote, I will be here. The door is open, but I am holding the key." My father's letter was shorter. "Dad, you laughed at the dinner table at a man who works nights to support his family, because that is what integrity looks like in practice. I want you to sit with that, not because I want you to feel bad, but because I want you to understand what you communicated to me about what I am worth. I deserve better than that. So does Daniel. So honestly do you, because the version of yourself that laughs at that dinner table is not the father I know you capable of being. I'll wait for that version." Uncle Raymond delivered both letters the following afternoon. He called me after. "Your father read his twice," he said. "He didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked if you were happy." I closed my eyes. "I told him yes," Raymond said, "as happy as I've ever seen you." Another silence. He said, "Good." It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in a wall that had seemed solid. I held onto it. 10 days after the wedding, Garrett published his video. He kept it clean and honest. No names of the family members, no specific accusations, just the story. A woman's wedding nearly canceled by a family member's interference, a best friend who built a backup plan in secret over 6 months, a security guard who showed up every ordinary Tuesday. He included footage of Mrs. Park's flowers, the lights in the sycamore trees, Daniel's mother singing along to the music, Uncle Raymond's hands clasped in his lap during the vows. He included one clip, just a few seconds long, of the gate. Two well-dressed figures standing outside the fence, looking in at the lights and the people and the dancing, and then turning and walking back to their cars. He didn't identify anyone. He didn't have to. In Sacramento, in the communities my parents moved through, business networks, church circles, neighborhood associations, the math was simple enough. Within 5 days, my mother received 3 phone calls from women in her design network who had seen the video and were asking gently if everything was okay at home. My father's LinkedIn post, the philosophical one about watching someone choose comfort over security, was quietly deleted. The dinner invitations from the golf club thinned out. The social weight of 30 years of community credibility shifted in the quiet, irreversible ways that facts tend to shift things when they are finally public. And then the unexpected part. Garrett's video included, almost as an afterthought, a 15-second clip of the security booth at the Harlow Tower building. Just B-roll he had shot one morning to establish Daniel's world. The booth, the lobby, the way Daniel stood at the entrance with a calm authority that filled the whole frame. A facilities management company in the Sacramento area, a firm that handles security operations for commercial properties, saw that clip. Their HR director reached out to Daniel directly 4 days after the video posted. Daniel had been taking night classes toward a facilities management certification for 18 months. He had never told me the exact scope of his plan. He is not a man who talks about what he's building until it's built. But the certification was 6 weeks from completion. The company knew that. They had looked him up thoroughly before they called. They offered him a junior operations manager position, daytime hours, benefits, a salary that was, in Daniel's careful words when he told me, enough to feel like something we built, not something we were given. My parents had spent 2 years telling the world that this man had no ceiling. They were not wrong about the ceiling. They were wrong about why. The ceiling was not the security booth. The ceiling was always going to be whatever Daniel decided it was, and he had been deciding, quietly, in night classes, in overtime shifts, in 18 months of patient work, while my parents were busy judging what he drove and where he parked. I want to say something directly before this ends. I did not tell this story so you would hate my parents. My father is a man who grew up with nothing and built something real, and decided that the measure of a man's worth was the distance between where he started and where his resume said he'd arrived. He built that framework from genuine survival. It served him, but it was never a universal truth, and he applied it like one. My mother is a woman who loved her daughter the best way she knew how, which was to keep her close enough to protect. She confused closeness with control because, in her experience, the people who left were the ones who didn't love you enough to stay. She was trying to hold on. I understand that, but understanding it does not make it acceptable, and accepting it without naming it was slowly making me disappear. If you have people in your life who measure your worth by your title, your salary, your zip code, who love you conditionally and then call the conditions love, hear this. You are not ungrateful for wanting more than their blueprint. You are not disloyal for choosing your own life. You are not naive for believing that a man who shows up every ordinary Tuesday is worth more than a man who impresses at dinner parties. Real love is not a credential check. Real love shows up at your date. 3 months after the wedding, a small package arrived at our apartment. No note, just a return address I recognized, my parents' house in Granite Bay. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a framed photograph. It was a picture of me that I did not know existed. I was 4 years old, sitting on the steps of our old house on Brennan Street, holding a book open in both hands with total concentration, completely unaware of the camera. On the back, in my father's handwriting, 3 words. She always knew. I held it for a long time. It was not a full apology. It was not a conversation, not yet. But it was a man who does not easily say he was wrong, finding the smallest possible way to say it. I set it on the shelf next to our wedding photo. Daniel and me under the sycamore trees at the Sycamore Terrace. Mrs. Park's white roses in the arch behind us, the string lights beginning to glow as the April sun went down. Daniel came in from his evening class, backpack over one shoulder, and saw me standing at the shelf. You okay? I stood there a moment, holding the small framed photograph of a 4-year-old who already knew what she wanted. Yeah, I said. I really am. Through the window, the last of the evening light fell gold across the floor. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's radio was playing. A dog was barking 2 buildings over. The ordinary world going about its ordinary business, as it does every ordinary Tuesday. My name is Savannah Brooke Weston Reyes. I am 26 years old, and for the first time, truly, completely, without permission, my life belongs to me. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to know. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had someone show up for you the way Renata showed up for me before you even knew you needed it. Or tell me if you're someone else's Renata right now. Either way, I'm glad you're here. See you in the next one.